They came to her door in the dead of night, two wolves, half frozen, desperate to be let in. But Clara didn't know. Those weren't just wolves. They were something ancient, something watching her for weeks. And when she opened that door, she didn't just save them, she changed the fate of an entire pack. The storm came out of nowhere. Hours earlier, the mountain sky had been clear, an endless black dome speckled with cold stars. But by midnight, it howled like something alive, slamming against the shutters of Clara Wren's cabin high above Timberline Pass. The wind clawed at the wooden walls, rattling the old glass panes until they hummed with the pressure. Snow spun outside in white fury, a living curtain that devoured the world beyond her porch. Clara added another log to the fire, watching it catch and hiss, sparks flicking upward like a dying constellation. This wasn't in the forecast, she muttered, rubbing warmth into her arms. Her radio had called for light flurries. Instead, she was staring at a blizzard that looked capable of burying entire roads. She wasn't afraid, not exactly. After all, solitude had been her choice. She'd left the noise of a city, the endless questions after the accident, and come up here to finish her photography project. The mountains were supposed to be her reset button, a place to heal. But lately, she wasn't sure if the silence was helping or slowly swallowing her. A sharp thud jolted her. Then another soft, deliberate. Not the creak of old timber. Not the groan of wind. Clara froze, mug halfway to her lips. She listened. The storm's howl dulled everything, but beneath it she could swear she heard something rhythmic. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Her eyes flicked toward the door. It was too cold for visitors and too remote for neighbors. Her cabin sat at the end of a service road that vanished under snow by October. No one should be here. Still, the sound came again, closer now. Louder. Scratch. Then a low, aching whine that didn't belong to the wind. Her first thought was animal. Her second, predator. She stood, instinctively grabbing her flashlight and the old rifle hanging above the hearth. It had belonged to her father, who taught her that kindness was good, but caution kept you breathing. Probably a fox, she whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. Or a deer caught in the drift. But as she crept toward the door and aimed her light through the frosted window, what she saw stole the air from her lungs. Two wolves. One was sprawled half in the snow, half against her step, its fur so matted with blood and frost it was hard to tell its color. The other, tall, powerful, silver gray, stood over it, pawing desperately at her door. Its fur was crusted with ice, but its eyes glowed a fierce, unnatural amber. Clara gasped and stumbled back. The rifle nearly slipped from her hands. Wolves didn't come this close to humans. And they definitely didn't beg. Her flashlight beam trembled across them. The smaller wolf sighed, heaved in shallow breaths, blood staining the snow like spilled paint. The silver wolf let out a low, heart-wrenching sound, a mix between a growl and a plea. Its gaze locked on hers through the glass, unblinking. Intelligent. Desperate. She swallowed hard. Every voice in her head screamed, "Don't open that door. They'll survive," she whispered to herself. Wolves live through worse storms than this. But she knew that wasn't true. The injured one was fading fast. No wild creature could survive long with a wound like that in sub-zero wind. The silver wolf pawed at the door again, more frantic this time. The sound hit something deep in Clara's chest, a buried place of memory and guilt. The place where she still heard the squeal of tires, still saw the flash of headlights before everything went black. No one helped me either, she thought. Not when I needed it most. Her breath came out shaky. She lowered the rifle. Her hand moved before her mind caught up, touching the latch. "This is insane," she whispered, her heart hammering. Absolutely insane. The metal was freezing cold under her fingertips. She hesitated only a heartbeat before pushing it open. The wind punched through the doorway like a living force, whipping her hair across her face. Snow exploded inward, stinging her cheeks. The silver wolf froze, eyes wide, breath steaming. They stared at each other across the threshold. Two creatures both trapped by isolation, both aching for warmth. Clara took one step back, making space. "Come in," she said softly. For a long moment, the wolf didn't move. Then, almost hesitantly, it nosed at the fallen smaller one, then nudged it toward the open door. The injured wolf whimpered, dragging itself weakly across the snow. Clara's throat tightened as she watched it struggle. "That's it," she murmured, tears freezing at the corners of her lashes. "Come on. You're safe here." As if understanding, the silver wolf dipped its head once, almost like a nod, before helping its companion inside. When the last trace of their tails disappeared over the threshold, Clara shut the door on the storm. The cabin fell silent again, except for the fire's low hiss and the sound of her own heart, pounding like thunder. And that was the night everything changed. For a long moment, Clara couldn't move. Her hands hung uselessly at her sides as she tried to reconcile what she was seeing. Two full-grown wolves, massive, wild, and bleeding, were now lying on her cabin floor. The fire crackled uncertainly, casting restless orange light across their slick fur. Melted snow pooled into small rivers under their paws, spreading slowly across the wooden planks. Every instinct she had screamed that this was wrong. Wild animals didn't behave like this. They didn't seek out human shelter. And they sure as hell didn't stare at you like they were trying to understand you. The silver one's eyes, deep, liquid amber, followed her every motion with unnerving precision. It wasn't hunger that burned there. It wasn't fear either. It was something else. "Okay," she whispered, forcing her shaking breath into control. "You just stay there." "Ow." She trailed off, realizing she had no plan. No clue what you're supposed to do when two apex predators stroll into your living room. Her father's old rifle still leaned by the door, within reach if things went south. But even as she glanced at it, some deeper part of her knew she wouldn't use it. Not after the way the silver wolf had looked at her. Not after the way he'd nudged his companion inside like a guardian. The smaller wolf lay motionless near the hearth, its chest rising in thin, shallow jerks. The trap had torn deep into the muscle of its hind leg. Dried blood crusted the fur in jagged patches. The sight made Clara's stomach twist. "Damn poachers," she muttered, crouching down. "You shouldn't have to go through this." The silver wolf let out a low rumble, a sound that vibrated through her bones. Clara froze, meeting his gaze. It wasn't a growl. It was a warning. Protective. "You'll have to trust me," she said quietly, forcing calm into her voice. "If I don't get that metal off, your friend's not going to make it." Her fingers brushed the cold steel trap. The edges were biting into the flesh, glinting cruelly in the firelight. She worked fast, her breath hitching as she pried at the springs with trembling hands. The silver wolf inched closer, head level with hers now, watching every move. The heat of his breath brushed her sleeve. "I'm not going to hurt her," Clara murmured, almost pleading. "I'm helping." A sharp snap broke the silence as the trap sprang open. The smaller wolf yelped, a sound so pained that Clara flinched, biting her lip. I know, hold on, I've got you," she soothed. She cleaned the wound as best she could, pouring peroxide over it and wrapping it tightly with gauze torn from her kit. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, panting softly. "That's all I can do," she whispered. "You'll have to do the rest." The silver wolf tilted his head, eyes flicking from the bandage to her face. Then he lowered his massive body beside the injured one, curling around her protectively. The sight was almost human in its tenderness. Clara blinked hard, her chest aching with a strange, unexpected emotion. "You're incredible," she breathed. "Both of you." The fire popped loudly, scattering sparks up the chimney. The storm outside raged harder, the wind shrieking like it wanted the walls to split. But inside, there was a fragile kind of peace. She moved carefully to the kitchen and poured 2 bowls of leftover stew, one for herself, one for the wolves. It was ridiculous, she knew. They'd never eat it. But when she set the bowl down halfway between them, the silver wolf's gaze followed her hands. "Here," she said softly. "Food. You must be starving." For a long time, nothing happened. Then the silver wolf's ears flicked forward. He rose, slowly, warily, and took a step toward the bowl. His paws made no sound on the wood. He sniffed once, then twice. And to Clara's shock, he began to eat. She exhaled shakily, watching the muscles move beneath his thick fur. The injured wolf stirred weakly, trying to lift her head. The silver one paused, then nudged the bowl closer to her. The smaller wolf lapped at the broth, feeble but alive. Something about the sight, two wild predators sharing her stew in front of her fire, should have felt absurd. But instead, it felt right. Like a memory she couldn't quite recall. When the meal was gone, the silver wolf turned his gaze back to her. The fire's reflection danced in his eyes, and for the briefest instant, Clara swore she saw something flicker there, something almost human. Her throat tightened. "What are you?" she whispered before she could stop herself. The wolf tilted his head, the motion eerily deliberate, like he'd understood the question. His ears twitched, and then he lay down again, resting his head beside the smaller one. Clara let out a shaky laugh that almost turned into a sob.
Great.
I'm talking to wolves now. Perfectly normal night. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, sitting cross-legged near the fire. The heat painted her cheeks, but the rest of her body still trembled with cold and disbelief. "You're safe here," she murmured, more to the storm than to them. "At least for tonight." Her eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion tugging at her. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd last felt warmth, real warmth, not just from fire but from company. As she drifted towards sleep, she heard a sound that made her heart stumble. A soft, low hum, almost like a purr, but deeper, resonant. The silver wolf. The sound wrapped around her like a lullaby, ancient and soothing. She smiled drowsily. "Thank you, whoever you are," she whispered, her words fading into the firelight. The wolves did not answer, but their eyes stayed open long after hers closed. And somewhere beneath the wind's fury, a second storm, older, quieter, far more dangerous, was beginning to wake. When Clara woke, the storm was gone. The silence was what hit her first, deep, absolute, like the world itself had stopped breathing. Morning sunlight pressed weakly through the frosted windows, pale and cold. The fire had burned low to glowing embers, and for a moment she thought she'd dreamed the entire night. Her neck ached from sleeping on the floor, wrapped in the old wool blanket. The smell of smoke and melted snow hung heavy in the air. She rubbed her eyes, pushing herself up, and froze. They were still there, the wolves. The silver one lay stretched out beside the hearth, muscles relaxed but alert, head resting on his paws. His amber eyes tracked her as soon as she moved, calm but unblinking. The smaller one, its leg carefully bandaged, was curled up against his side, fast asleep. For several seconds, all Clara could do was stare. Her memories from the night before tumbled back. The blood, the trap, the impossible intelligence in those eyes. It had all been real. She had really opened her door to wolves. "Morning," she croaked. Her voice sounded foreign. "You two still alive, huh?" The silver wolf blinked slowly, and something in that simple motion made her heart pound harder.
"Right.
Talking to wolves again. Definitely losing it," she muttered. She stood and stretched, testing her nerves. The air inside the cabin was bitter with cold now that the fire had died down. She crouched by the stove and began rebuilding it, stacking kindling with shaking hands. The sound of the crackling flame returning filled the room, soft and comforting. When she turned again, she nearly dropped the poker. The smaller wolf was standing. Not limping. Not wobbling. Standing easily on all fours, its tail lifting slightly as it sniffed the air. Clara's gaze dropped to its bandaged leg, and then she stopped breathing. The bandages were gone, torn off in the night, and beneath them no blood.
No wound.
Not even a scar. Its fur had grown back thick and clean, smooth as untouched snow. "That's not possible," she whispered. "That's—" The silver wolf rose to his feet, muscles rippling under his winter coat. He stepped closer to the healed wolf, nuzzled her once, then turned to look directly at Clara. For a full 5 seconds, neither of them moved. The only sound was the soft hiss of the rekindled fire and the slow rhythm of her heart hammering in her ears. Clara took a small step back. "Okay," she said softly, half to herself. "Let's think this through." Her logical brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe she'd misjudged the injury in the dark. Maybe the cold had numbed her enough to imagine things worse than they were. Maybe the smaller wolf yawned and stretched, then trotted casually toward her table like it belonged there. The silver one followed, moving with that same measured grace, eyes flicking from her face to the door. "You want out?" she guessed, voice trembling. "You're ready to go back?" The silver wolf tilted his head. That same disarming, human gesture, and took one step toward her. His paws made no sound on the old wooden boards. Clara's mouth went dry. She gripped the edge of the table for balance. "Don't look at me like that," she murmured. "You're wolves. Wolves don't stare like that." But they did. And now, both pairs of eyes were on her. Her pulse quickened. There was a thought pressing against her mind, so strange and absurd that she tried to push it away. But it kept returning, louder each time. "They understand you." The smaller wolf, the one whose blood had stained her floor hours ago, sat at her feet, tail flicking. Its fur brushed against her jeans, and something electric rippled up her leg. The sensation wasn't pain or cold. It was warmth, a deep, humming vibration that sank straight into her bones. She gasped and stumbled backward, hand flying to her thigh, where the fur had touched. Her skin tingled. The wolves both watched, ears pricking. What the hell are you?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "What is this?" Neither moved. The only answer was the wind pressing softly against the windows. Clara's thoughts spiraled. She'd read about strange mountain legends in her first months here, whispers of spirits that roamed these ridges, guardians of the forest who walked between forms. Old superstitions told by loggers and hunters to scare tourists. She'd laughed them off at the time. Now, standing barefoot on her cabin floor with two wolves who behaved like sentient beings, she wasn't laughing. Her heart pounded faster. She felt trapped, not by them, but by her own disbelief. The silver wolf suddenly stepped closer, breaking her frozen panic. He stopped just out of reach and looked at her, ears forward, posture low. Not threatening. Waiting. Clara swallowed hard. You saved each other last night," she whispered. "I just helped." He blinked once, slow and deliberate, as if acknowledging the words. Something in her chest broke open. Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. She hadn't spoken to anyone for weeks. Hadn't connected with anyone since the accident that took her fiancé last winter. And now, impossibly, she felt less alone in this cabin with two wild predators than she had surrounded by people. "Fine," she whispered, wiping her eyes roughly. "You can stay. Until the storm clears." The smaller wolf's ears perked up. The silver one turned toward the door again, pacing once before sitting back down near the hearth. His gaze flicked toward her camera on the table, her most prized possession. She followed his line of sight, frowning. "What, you want a photo?" she asked, trying to sound amused. But even as she spoke, something inside her told her she wasn't wrong. The fire cracked sharply behind them, and for a moment, the flames reflected in his eyes. Amber shot through with faint, shifting streaks of gold, almost like molten metal. The sight froze her where she stood. "Okay," she breathed. "You're not normal. I get it." Her fear had changed now. It wasn't about danger anymore.
It was about knowing.
Knowing that whatever these creatures were, they weren't just animals. And something deep inside her, a part of her that had gone quiet for a long, long time, wanted to understand them. Outside, the world was white and unbroken. But inside the cabin, something ancient and invisible was waking. Clara didn't know it yet, but the storm hadn't brought the wolves to her door by chance. It had brought her to them. The storm's silence lasted 3 days. By the second morning, Clara stopped flinching every time the wolves moved. By the third, she found herself talking to them as if they were houseguests instead of apex predators that could crush bone with a single bite. "Don't look at me like that," she said as she stirred soup on the stove. It's venison stew, not fresh elk. I don't hunt. The smaller wolf, she'd started calling her Ash, for the faint silver streak on her muzzle, sniffed the air with unmistakable interest. The big one, Ronan, a name that had simply arrived in her mind and refused to leave, sat a few feet away, posture dignified, eyes half-lidded against the firelight. Clara laughed under her breath. You're judging my cooking.
Admit it.
Ronan's ear twitched. Ash thumped her tail twice on the floorboards, and Clara nearly dropped the ladle. You actually, oh no.
Nope.
I am not living in a Disney movie. Still, she ladled 2 bowls and slid one to the floor. The wolves ate neatly, side by side, as if they'd done it 100 times before. When the meal was done, Ronan padded toward the door and stared out through the frosted glass. Beyond it, the world glimmered in blinding white. The storm had stripped the mountain clean, leaving the pines bowing under diamond-heavy snow. You want out, huh? Clara murmured. After everything, you still want the forest. He looked back at her, tail still, head slightly tilted, the same uncanny, human tilt. Okay, fine, she said, pulling on her parka. But you're not ditching me the second I open this door. She cracked the door open, and a blast of crystalline air rushed in, sharp and dry. Ash bounded through the gap, burying herself joyfully in the snowdrift outside. Ronan followed, stepping into the light like a king returning to his throne. His coat blazed silver under the sun, each hair catching the brilliance until he looked carved from the storm itself. Clara leaned against the doorway, watching. Her camera hung forgotten around her neck. She didn't dare break the spell with the click of a shutter. For the first time in months, she felt alive. When the wolves finally returned, the sky was burning orange behind the peaks. They carried no prey, only snow on their fur and a quiet that felt almost reverent. That night, Clara read aloud by the fire. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the silence pressing too hard on her ears. Maybe it was the way Ronan's eyes followed her lips when she spoke. She chose one of her grandfather's journals, a collection of field notes about the mountains, half legend, half observation. They say the silver pines sing. She read softly, the words flickering in the lamplight. That on still nights the wind through their branches carries voices older than man. Ronan's head lifted at the phrase. His ears pricked, and Ash whimpered low, restless. You've heard it too, haven't you? Clara asked before she could stop herself. The fire popped, loud in the small room. Neither wolf answered, but both turned toward the window. Outside, the forest was perfectly still, until it wasn't. A faint, keening tone rose from the trees, too deliberate to be wind, too mournful to be birds. It was beautiful in a way that made Clara's skin prickle. The sound moved like water through the pines, swelling, ebbing, almost calling. What is that? She whispered. Ash pressed against her leg, trembling. Ronan stood between them and the door, muscles rigid, eyes burning brighter than the fire itself. The song grew louder for a heartbeat, then faded into nothing. The cabin felt smaller when the silence returned. Clara swallowed hard. Okay, that's new. Ronan relaxed slowly, padding back toward the hearth. Ash followed, curling up beside him. Clara knelt, one hand hovering over Ronan's thick ruff before she dared to touch. His fur was warm, the heat pulsing beneath it alive and strange. You're protecting me, she murmured. From what? He exhaled through his nose, a sound almost like a sigh. The weight of it filled the room, sad, ancient, and inexplicably human. Later, as she drifted toward sleep, the phrase from the journal circled her thoughts. The silver pines sing. In her dreams, the song became words she couldn't understand, and a figure, half man, half wolf, stood at her door, whispering her name through the snow. When she woke, the fire was out, her breath clouding the air. The wolves were gone. Their paw prints led straight to the forest and ended at the edge of the trees, as if they'd vanished into the singing pines themselves. The next morning dawned too still. Not peaceful, just hollow. Even the air inside the cabin felt empty, without the wolves' quiet breathing beside the hearth. Clara stared at the cold, blackened logs in the fireplace. It didn't seem possible that only hours ago, two living, breathing creatures had lain there, their fur steaming in the firelight. The bowls she'd left out were licked clean. No scratches, no overturned chairs, no chaos. Only absence. She told herself they'd gone back to the forest. That wild things don't stay, where humans live. It was logical, expected, normal. So why did it feel like being abandoned all over again? She tried to distract herself. Boiled water for tea. Organized camera gear. Wiped down the table, though it wasn't dirty. But no matter what she did, her eyes kept drifting to the window. The forest looked different now. Too bright, too quiet. And then she saw them. Paw prints. Leading away from her porch, clean and distinct in the fresh snow. Clara's heart stuttered. She was halfway through pulling on her coat before her brain caught up. "This is crazy," she muttered. "They're gone. Leave it alone." But her hands kept moving, lacing boots, grabbing gloves, slinging her camera bag over her shoulder out of instinct more than intention. She stepped into the cold. The print started right at her doorstep, massive, clear, heavy with purpose. They wound through the drifts down toward the treeline, where the world turned to white silence. Her breath made quick clouds in the air as she followed, her boots crunching through the crusted snow. The prints were strange, too orderly. Most wolves walked staggered, their gaits uneven in deep snow. But these? Perfectly aligned, as if both animals had walked in single file. The deeper impressions were Ronan's. She recognized their size, the almost circular symmetry of his paws. Ash's tracks, smaller, lighter, followed close behind. And then halfway down the slope, she saw it. A footprint. Not paw.
Foot. Bear.
Human. Clara froze mid-step, heart slamming so hard it hurt. She knelt, brushing snow from the imprint with shaking hands.
Toes.
Arch heel. All there. Deep enough to belong to a man, tall, heavy, moving fast. She looked around, but the clearing was empty. No broken branches, no prints from boots, no signs of clothing or supplies. Just that one bare human track, pressed neatly beside the trail of wolves. "What the hell?" she whispered. The wind sighed through the trees. For a moment she thought she heard something, movement, off to her right. A low crack of snow beneath weight. She turned sharply, scanning the tree line. Nothing but the skeletons of pines and the distant glint of ice. Still, she wasn't alone. She could feel it. Something watched her from beyond the white. She forced her legs to move, following the trail deeper. The prints wove between snow-buried boulders, down to the frozen stream that carved through the valley. Here, the paw prints scattered, crossing back and forth across the ice as though the wolves had been pacing or arguing. Her father used to say animals didn't argue. They fight or they flee, but they don't hesitate. The scene before her told him wrong. The snow was torn in places where claws had raked the surface, but no blood showed, no kill nearby. It looked like a conversation frozen mid-sentence. And then she saw the tree. Its bark was scored with deep claw marks, but not random. 4 slashes down, 2 across, intersecting like a symbol. It looked carved, not by chance. Almost like a letter. Her throat tightened. The mark glowed faintly. She blinked hard, but it didn't fade. A pale silver shimmer, subtle yet undeniable, pulsed within the grooves. The cold seemed to breathe around it, every exhale of wind humming through the trees in a low note she could feel in her ribs. Her camera. Her hands fumbled for it, nearly dropping it as she lifted the lens. She clicked once, flash off. The screen blinked, then went black. Dead battery. "Of course," she muttered. A soft sound drifted behind her, a crunch of snow, light and deliberate. She spun around. Ronan stood at the edge of the trees. Her heart leapt. Oh, thank God. But she stopped. He looked different in daylight. Taller somehow, shoulders broader, eyes not amber now but molten gold. Snow dusted his muzzle and clung to the thick fur of his chest. He was magnificent and terrifying. "Where's Ash?" she whispered. The wolf didn't move. He just watched her, expression unreadable. Then he took a single step closer, and the world tilted. For one dizzying moment, she swore she saw a man standing where the wolf was, a man with ash-gray hair, bare shoulders, and those same glowing eyes. Her breath hitched. The vision flickered, like light bending through heat, and then it was gone. Only Ronan again, staring. Clara stumbled backward, her boots slipping on the ice. The jolt broke her trance. "This isn't real," she gasped, shaking her head. "I'm exhausted. That's all. You're just wolves." Just. Ronan lowered his head slightly, almost as if he pitied her. Then he turned, leapt once, and vanished into the trees. Clara stood alone beside the marked trunk, shaking, the strange symbol burning faintly behind her eyelids like afterimage from a camera flash. For the first time since the blizzard, she wanted to leave the mountain. But something told her, some deep, unshakable intuition, that whatever Ronan was, he hadn't brought the storm to her door by accident. He had brought a warning, and it was only beginning. That night the wind returned, not the screaming blizzard that had battered the cabin before, but a low, endless murmur that sounded almost like breathing. Clara couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the human footprint beside the paw prints, kept replaying the moment the wolf had flickered into the shape of a man. Every creak of the timbers made her nerves jump. The forest pressed close, a dark ocean beyond her windows. Somewhere out there, Ronan prowled unseen. And she knew, without knowing how, that he was close. Watching. She sat by the dying fire with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The mark carved into the tree haunted her mind. When she closed her eyes, she could still see it, the silver lines glowing faintly in the dark, breathing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered into the empty room. The flames gave no answer. But the next blink took her elsewhere. The cabin was gone. She stood barefoot in snow under a sky spilling with green aurora. Wolves moved around her in a silent ring, dozens of them, their coats shimmering as though made from the northern lights themselves. In the center stood a man. Bare-chested, hair the color of frost, eyes like molten gold. "Ronan." He lifted his hand toward her, palm out. "You found the mark," he said. His voice carried through the dream like distant thunder, low and melodic. Clara couldn't speak. The words froze in her throat. "You have to remember," he continued, stepping closer. "The song brought you here for a reason." "What reason?" she managed. "Who are you?" Ronan's fingers brushed her cheek. The touch burned hot despite the cold. "You already know," he said. "You've known since the night you opened the door." Light flared between them, blinding white. The world shattered. Clara jerked awake with a cry, the mug of coffee spilling across her lap. The fire was nothing but embers now, the room still and dim. Her pulse raced, skin slick with sweat despite the cold. "Just a dream," she whispered, clutching her knees. "Just a damn dream." But her cheek still tingled where he'd touched her. She pushed herself up, pacing. She needed air. Logic. Distance. When she opened the door, the wind slapped her face, sharp and real. The moon hung low, swollen silver. The forest glowed faintly, each snow-laden branch outlined in pale light. She stepped onto the porch. The snow crunched beneath her boots, hard and brittle. At first she saw nothing, only the endless white, but then her eyes adjusted and she spotted movement near the treeline. A figure.
Tall.
Barefoot. Human. Her breath caught. Ronan. The shape turned its head. For an instant, moonlight hit its face. Too bright, too sharp, features both familiar and wild. Then it vanished into the trees without a sound. Clara's legs moved before reason could stop them. She grabbed her flashlight and followed, boots punching through crusted snow. The beam wavered through the darkness, catching the gleam of ice, the whisper of branches. "Ronan," she called again. The name felt strange in her mouth, like speaking a memory instead of a word. "If you're real, please stop." The light flickered, sputtered, then died. The batteries froze in seconds. She was left in darkness, lit only by the moon. And then she heard it, the same distant song she'd dreamed, threading through the pines, a harmony of voices both human and not. The notes vibrated in her chest, pulling her forward. She stumbled through knee-deep drifts until she reached the hollow where the stream curved under a sheet of ice. Ronan stood there. No wolf now, no illusion. A man, bare-skinned in the bitter cold, silver hair gleaming like liquid metal. Steam rose from his shoulders where the snow touched him. Clara's mouth went dry. This can't be happening. He smiled faintly, something sorrowful in it. You shouldn't be here yet, he said. Yet, she echoed, shivering. What are you? Bound, he answered simply. To this mountain.
To you.
I saw the footprint. The mark on the tree. The mark is ours, he interrupted gently. A promise carved generations ago. It called you. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. Called me? Why me? Ronan stepped closer, and she caught the faint shimmer of light under his skin, the same silver that had glowed in the wound she'd healed days ago. Because you carry the same blood, he said. You just don't remember. Her heart lurched. That's insane. Is it? He raised his hand. Frost crystals lifted from the snow and swirled between them, catching the moonlight like a miniature storm. They hung suspended in the air, forming symbols, the same cross-slash sigil she'd seen carved into the pine. Your grandfather left this place to you, for a reason. He was one of us once. Clara shook her head, backing away. My grandfather was a forest ranger. A man. Ronan's eyes softened. He was both. The ice beneath them groaned. The sound of the forest song swelled until it filled the night, 1,000 voices rising and falling. Ronan's form blurred at the edges, fur bleeding into skin, gold eyes into amber. Wait, she shouted. Don't. But he was already gone, collapsing into light and mist that scattered like breath on cold air. The song stopped. Silence fell heavy as snow. Clara dropped to her knees, hands digging into the frozen crust. Her breath came in ragged bursts. She didn't know what terrified her more, that she'd imagined it all or that she hadn't. Behind her, the pines whispered with a wind that almost sounded like her name. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of snow sliding off the cabin roof, a dull, heavy thud that made her heart leap before she realized it wasn't footsteps. She sat up on the couch, blanket tangled around her legs, every nerve still buzzing from the dream, or vision, of the night before. For hours she sat there, staring at her grandfather's old trunk in the corner. It had always been just furniture, a relic she'd inherited along with the cabin, and a tangle of grief she'd never wanted to untie. Now it felt like a locked door she had to open. By noon, curiosity had burned away fear. She dragged the trunk into the light and pried the old iron latch open. Dust rose like breath from another century. Inside lay tools, weathered notebooks, a compass, a broken rifle scope, and a bundle wrapped in deerskin. Her fingers trembled as she unrolled it. Inside was a journal, bound in cracked leather, the pages stained and soft at the edges. Her grandfather's handwriting curved across the yellowed paper in his familiar bold strokes. The first entry stopped her cold. January 14th. The wolves came again tonight. The silver, one watched me from the tree-line. Not hunting, guarding. The pact still holds, though the others have forgotten. Clara swallowed hard and flipped ahead. The entries became less like notes and more like confessions. He wrote of dreams, wolves that spoke in riddles, of voices carried on the wind, of blood that shimmered silver in moonlight. He mentioned a name, the Fenrir line, a family bound to protect the mountain from those who forget what it means to be human. Her family, her blood. At the back of the journal, a drawing, the same symbol she'd seen carved into the tree. Beneath it, a warning. When the song returns, the veil weakens. One of our blood must choose stay blind or stand between. Clara sat back, staring at the words until they blurred. Stay blind or stand between. She closed the book with a soft thud, pulse hammering in her ears. If her grandfather had believed this, If it wasn't just madness, then she was already caught in something far older than she understood. That night, she dreamt again. The aurora burned across the sky, but this time she wasn't standing in snow. She was under it, buried deep in a crystal cavern. Wolves circled her again, but their shapes flickered between human and beast, men and women with eyes like fire, moving with the grace of predators. Ronan stood at the center, his gaze fixed on her. "You're remembering," he said. "The blood calls when danger nears." "What danger?" she asked. Her voice echoed strangely, like the cavern itself spoke with her. "The ones who broke the pact," he said, his tone darkening. "They're coming back. Hunters who see us as trophies, not kin." The veil weakens Clara. "If they find this place, they'll find you too." Before she could reply, the ground cracked open beneath her feet. She fell into darkness, choking on cold air that smelled of iron and smoke. She woke with a scream. The fire had burned low. Outside, the wind howled with the voice of something alive. And through it, between the gusts, came the unmistakable rumble of engines. Clara froze. Engines. No one came up this far in winter. The nearest town was 20 miles away. She stumbled to the window. Down in the valley, faint lights bobbed through the trees, 3, maybe 4 of them. Headlamps. Moving slowly, methodically. Too steady for hikers, too quiet for rescue workers. Her skin crawled. "Hunters," she whispered. She turned toward the wall where the rifle hung above the hearth, her grandfather's old Winchester. She hadn't touched it in years. Her hands shook as she took it down, checking the chamber. Still loaded. Still oiled. Still waiting. She paced the small room, heart thudding. What would she do if they came here? Tell them she was alone? That she'd been dreaming about wolves who talked in riddles? They'd laugh, or worse, they'd believe her. A thud on the porch made her spin. She leveled the rifle, pulse pounding. "Who's there?" The door creaked. Wind shoved through the cracks, carrying the smell of pine and something metallic, blood. Then a shadow moved across the window. "Clara." The voice was low, hoarse, and unmistakably human. She hesitated, lowering the gun a fraction. "Ronan." The door opened. He stepped inside, not in his wolf form, not glowing with moonlight this time, but fully human.
Tall.
Barefoot. A deep cut slashed across his shoulder, crimson against skin too pale to be normal. His breath fogged the air, but his eyes still burned gold. "They're here," he said simply. "And they're not stopping for the night." Clara's voice cracked. "The hunters?" He nodded, wiping blood from his arm with a shaking hand. "They've tracked the pack for weeks. They have silver bullets and fire. They know your name." "My name? Why would?" "Because of your blood," Ronan said, stepping closer. "You're the last of the Fenrir line, the one who can keep the veil closed." Her throat went dry. "You think I can stop them? I'm not one of you." He met her eyes. "You will be." Thunder rolled across the mountain, but it wasn't thunder.
It was gunfire.
The first shot shattered the quiet, echoing through the pines like the cracking of ice. Ronan's head snapped toward the window. "They've found the den." "The others?" Clara asked, heart lurching. "Fighting." His jaw clenched. "We need to move." "Move where?" He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his gaze softened. "Somewhere they can't follow." Clara tightened her grip on the rifle. "Then we'd better run." Outside, the forest glowed silver beneath the full moon. Shadows shifted between the trees, wolves and men, hunters and hunted, ancient lines of blood colliding once more. And Clara, heart hammering, realized this was the moment her grandfather's words had warned about. She had a choice now, stay blind or stand between. The forest was no longer quiet. It roared with chaos, branches snapping, wolves howling, men shouting over the wind. The smell of gunpowder and pine resin filled the air, sharp enough to sting. Clara ran behind Ronan through knee-deep drifts, lungs burning, rifle heavy in her hands. "Keep low," he barked. She ducked as another gunshot split the night. Snow burst from a tree trunk inches from her face. The bullet hissed into the darkness beyond. This way. Ronan veered sharply to the right, leading her toward a narrow ravine where moonlight glimmered on frozen stone. His movements were impossibly fast, half man, half blur. Clara stumbled after him, half running, half falling, her breath coming in ragged clouds.
Behind them, voices closed in.
Spread out. I saw them. One of M's human. They're together. Shoot if you see movement. Clara's pulse hammered. They think I'm one of you, she gasped. Ronan didn't slow. You are. They skidded to a halt at the ravine's edge. The drop wasn't far, 10, maybe 12 feet, but the ground below shimmered with ice. He turned to her, eyes burning gold in the dark. Jump. You're insane, she said, but he was already gone, leaping soundlessly into the ravine and landing in a crouch. Clara hesitated only a moment, then followed. Her boots hit the frozen stream hard enough to jar her knees, but she stayed upright. Ronan caught her arm to steady her, his grip searing hot even through the cold.
Come on, he said.
They'll track our scent fast. They ran along the frozen creek bed, the walls of the ravine rising on either side like silver cliffs. The moon hung low, a pale coin behind drifting clouds. Where are the others? She asked between breaths.
Fighting, he said.
Frost is holding them off near the den. The others are circling to flank the hunters. Frost. My sister, he said quickly. The one you saved. Clara's heart clenched. She's out there? You can't. He stopped suddenly, catching her wrist. Listen. At first she heard only the wind. Then faintly, so faint she almost thought she imagined it, a howl. It rose and fell through the trees, raw and desperate. Ronan's face tightened. They've set traps. The howl cut off abruptly. Clara felt her stomach drop. Ronan. He took a step back toward the sound, every muscle in his body trembling with fury. You can't, she said, grabbing his arm. They'll kill you too. His jaw worked, eyes blazing. For a moment, she thought he'd tear away. Then he exhaled, long and slow. If I go back, I die. If I don't, they'll find her anyway. We need to end this another way. What way? By ending them. The way he said it chilled her. But before she could answer, a voice shouted from above the ravine. There. Movement. Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off stone and ice. Clara threw herself flat, snow stinging her face. Ronan snarled, a sound more animal than human, and dragged her toward a narrow cave half buried in frost. They dove inside as bullets ricocheted off the rocks outside. The passage was tight, the ceiling low. Clara crawled on hands and knees, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Ronan moved ahead, his body shifting subtly, his shoulders broadening, his fingers lengthening into claws that caught the dim light. Are you? She whispered. Halfway, he said, voice deepening, almost breaking apart. Can't hold it long in this form. The tunnel widened into a hollow chamber where faint light seeped through cracks in the ice above. Ronan leaned against the wall, panting. His skin glistened with sweat. His breath came in short, growling bursts. You're bleeding, Clara said. The cut on his shoulder had reopened, dark blood dripping onto the ice. She tore a strip from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound. He winced, but didn't move away. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. You said they know my name, she reminded him. If I'm already marked, I might as well fight. He looked at her then, really looked, and a strange sadness crossed his face. You're too much like him, he murmured. Like who? Your grandfather. He stood beside us the night the hunters first came. He bled for the pact. You carry his fire. Before she could answer, a new sound filled the tunnel, the distant, rhythmic thud of boots on snow. The hunters were moving closer, methodically, their flashlights slicing through the darkness outside. Ronan's head snapped up. We can't stay. Clara reached for her rifle. Then we make a stand. He shook his head.
No.
There's another way. He placed his palm against the icy wall. A faint silver light spread from his skin, tracing veins of frost outward in a web of glowing lines. The air hummed, vibrating through her bones. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Opening a door," he said. The wall cracked. Light spilled through, blinding and cold. When her vision cleared, the ice had melted away, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper underground. The walls shimmered faintly, as though made of crystal. Ronan turned to her. "Stay close. Don't look back, no matter what you hear." She nodded, throat tight. Together they slipped into the glowing tunnel as the hunters' voices echoed behind them. "Tracks lead here. Watch the corners." Something's moving under the ice. Then came a sharp crack, and one man's scream cut through the night. The forest answered with a single, terrible howl. Ronan grabbed her hand and pulled her deeper into the light. The walls around them pulsed like veins of some great living thing. Clara's breath came fast, her boots slipping on smooth stone. "What is this place?" she asked. "The heart of the mountain," he said. "Where the old pact was forged. Where my kind and yours first stood as one." The air grew warmer as they descended, the glow brighter. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern filled with frozen waterfalls that glittered like glass. In the center stood a stone altar carved with the same crossed symbol she'd seen on the tree. And above it, hanging in midair, a faint ring of light. Clara stopped, staring. "That's the veil." Ronan nodded. "And it's breaking." A hairline crack ran through the floating ring, spilling silver mist into the air. The mist twisted like smoke, forming shapes, faces, claws, eyes that watched. "If it shatters," Ronan said, voice low, "the barrier between our worlds falls. Hunters will see us, hunt us, and worse things will follow." Clara swallowed hard. "How do we stop it?" He looked at her then, a strange mix of fear and hope in his eyes. The blood that made the pact must renew it. Human and shifter, together. Her heart pounded. "You mean me?"
"Yes."
"You and me." Before she could respond, the cavern shook. The crack in the ring widened, spilling light across the floor. Above, gunfire echoed, then a scream, then silence. "They're here," Ronan said, baring his teeth. "They found us." The silver mist swirled violently, coalescing into shadowed forms, hunters stumbling through the fissures, their weapons drawn. But behind them came something else, a massive shape, part man, part beast, eyes glowing red instead of gold. Clara raised her rifle, hand steady now. "Tell me what to do." Ronan's lips curved into a grim smile. "Trust me." Then he shifted, completely this time, for exploding across his skin, bones realigning in flashes of silver light. The great wolf stood where the man had been, shoulders brushing her waist, eyes blazing like molten metal. "Go," she whispered. He lunged. The cavern filled with light, snow, and fury. The world became thunder. Clara flung herself against the cavern wall as the fight erupted. Wolves, dozens of them, poured through the tunnel, eyes blazing gold and blue and violet, their howls merging into a single unearthly note. The hunters fired wildly, muzzle flashes painting the cavern in bursts of orange light. Bullets sparked against stone, ricocheted into darkness. Ronan moved through the chaos like lightning. Massive, silver, unstoppable. He tore through the first line of men, knocking rifles aside, sending one crashing into the frozen lake with a scream that was cut short by ice. But the red-eyed creature, the twisted hybrid that had come with the hunters, was faster. It struck Ronan hard enough to crack the stone beneath them. The two beasts rolled across the cavern floor, claws and fangs flashing in blinding arcs. Clara crouched behind the altar, heart hammering. The rifle lay beside her, useless now. What good were bullets against something ancient enough to shape the wind? The veil pulsed above her, the crack widening, silver mist spilling like smoke. Every time it flared, she felt a pull in her chest, a heartbeat that wasn't hers sinking with something vast and old. Ronan's voice echoed in her memory. The blood that made the pact must renew it, human and shifter, together. She pressed her palm to her chest. Her heart raced beneath her ribs, wild and terrified, but alive. She was the blood. Her grandfather's warnings, the mark on the trees, the dreams, they had all led here. "Stay blind or stand between," she whispered. "Guess I'm done being blind." Clara grabbed the rifle by its barrel, smashed it against the stone, and snapped the wooden stock clean in half. Then she pressed the splintered edge against her palm until it bit deep. Warm blood welled and fell to the altar. The stone drank it greedily. Light flared, soft at first, then blinding. The symbol carved into the altar burned with molten silver. Lines of light snaked outward, tracing through the cavern walls, connecting to the ring of the veil above. Clara's hair whipped around her face as a cyclone of snow and light rose from the floor. The hunters stumbled back, shouting, their voices drowned by the roar that filled the air. Ronan broke from the fight, blood streaking his fur. He limped toward her, golden eyes wide. The red-eyed beast snarled, lunging after him, but the veil caught its edge. It screamed as light ripped through it, tearing it apart molecule by molecule until nothing remained but ash. Ronan collapsed beside the altar, shifting mid-fall, fur receding, bones reshaping until he was human again, naked and bruised, his skin glowing faintly with silver light. "Clara," he gasped, "don't, it'll burn you." "Then we burn together," she said, placing her bloodied hand on the stone. The world went white. Light surged through her veins, searing pain and euphoria tangled together. She felt herself pulled upward, out of her body, into the heart of the storm. The veil wasn't just a barrier. It was a memory, centuries old, pulsing with every life that had ever stood between human and wolf. She saw flashes, her grandfather kneeling beside a wolf the size of a horse, their blood mingling in snow, a woman with her face standing beneath auroras, whispering vows in a language older than speech, a war fought in the dark when man first forgot mercy. The images shattered into shards of silver light that swirled around her, pulling tight into her chest. When the light faded, she stood again on the cavern floor. The hunters were gone, either fled or swallowed by the veil's brilliance. The wolves surrounded her in a wide circle, their fur shining like constellations, their eyes reverent. Ronan knelt before her, still human now, breathing hard. His gaze lifted slowly, awe mixing with fear. "Clara," he said softly, "look at you." She followed his gaze and gasped. Silver light crawled beneath her skin, tracing the veins in her hands, her arms, her throat. Her breath came out in white wisps that glimmered like starlight. The wound on her palm had already closed, leaving a faint mark shaped like the ancient sigil. What did I do?" she whispered. "You renewed the pact," he said, voice trembling. "You sealed the veil. You did what none of us could." The wolves bowed their heads. A quiet filled the cavern, deep, holy, endless. The ring above them dimmed, the crack knitting shut until it was smooth again. The mist dispersed, leaving only silence and the faint sound of dripping water. Ronan rose slowly, his movements weary but graceful. "It's over," he said. But Clara shook her head.
"No."
Something changed. "I feel it." He took a step closer. "What do you feel?" "Everything," she whispered. "The forest, the snow, the heartbeat of the mountain." He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, light flared again, gentle this time, wrapping around them both like a breath. "You're one of us now," he said. "Not human, not wolf, both." Tears stung her eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ronan said, smiling faintly through exhaustion, "you never have to be alone again." The wolves began to fade, one by one, melting into the shadows of the cavern. The light dimmed until only the soft glow of the sealed veil remained. Ronan stood beside her, his body trembling but steady. For the first time since she'd come to the mountain, Clara felt no fear, only peace. Then, from deep within the tunnels, came a single howl, long, low, filled with sorrow. Ronan's expression darkened. "Frost." Clara turned toward the sound. "Your sister, she's still out there." He nodded grimly. And the hunters won't stop with tonight. Clara squared her shoulders, light still pulsing faintly beneath her skin. Then we go after her. Ronan smiled, small but fierce.
We.
You said I'm one of you, she said, meeting his eyes. Let's prove it. He reached out, brushing his thumb across the sigil on her hand. Then we hunt. Outside, dawn crept over the horizon, painting the snow in gold and rose. The mountain breathed, the storm gone, the forest alive again. And in that light, two figures, one man, one woman, both bound by blood and silver, emerged from the cavern, leaving footprints that glowed faintly before fading into the snow. The mountain was burning with light. By the time Clara and Ronan reached the surface, the horizon had already turned the color of molten copper. Steam rose from the drifts where the cavern's heat breathed through cracks in the snow. The air smelled of pine sap and spent gunpowder, a mixture of birth and death. They moved in silence at first, Ronan limping, Clara guiding him with one steady hand. Every step felt heavier now that the veil's glow had faded from her skin. The power still hummed inside her, muted but alive, a second heartbeat echoing under her ribs. A low moan drifted from the trees. Ronan stiffened. Frost, he whispered. They followed the sound up a narrow slope toward a clearing blackened by fire. Two snowmobiles lay overturned in the drift, one still smoking. The hunter's scent, iron and oil and fear, hung thick in the air. At the center of the clearing, Frost lay half-buried beneath broken branches, her white fur streaked with ash. When Clara knelt beside her, Frost's eyes fluttered open, pale blue, clouded with pain.
She's alive, Clara said.
Ronan dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against his sister's. I thought I'd lost you. You almost did, Frost rasped, shifting slightly. For an instant her features blurred, muzzle to human mouth, claws to fingers. The hunters, they used fire this time. Clara reached into her pack, pulling out the last of her gauze and a canteen. Let me help. Frost blinked at her, wary. Then she nodded. You carry our light, she murmured. I can feel it. As Clara wrapped the wound, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, scattering ash. From somewhere beyond the ridge came the cough of an engine trying to start. Ronan's head snapped toward the sound. They're not all dead. Clara tightened the bandage. Then we finish it. He rose, eyes darkening to molten gold.
No.
We end the hate, not the men. For a heartbeat, the two of them simply looked at each other, human, wolf, and something more. Then Clara stood, snow crunching beneath her boots. Let's make them listen. They found the survivors at the edge of the logging road, 3 men huddled beside a half-buried truck, rifles scattered, fear thick in the air. When Ronan stepped from the trees, they raised their weapons, hands shaking. Stay back, one shouted. You're monsters. Clara walked past Ronan and stopped 10 paces from them. The morning light caught her face, the faint silver veins still visible beneath her skin. Monsters, she said quietly. Or just what your stories forgot. The men stared, confused. She lifted her palm. The sigil burned faintly, a soft glow that painted the snow between them. This mountain isn't yours to conquer, she said. It never was. One of the men, older, beard crusted with frost, lowered his rifle. Then what are you? Clara smiled, small and sad. The one standing between. The light spread outward in a slow ripple, touching the trees, the snow, the wolves that ringed the clearing. When it faded, the hunters' weapons were heavy and useless, the fire in their eyes gone. They dropped to their knees, not out of fear, but understanding, the kind that comes when a myth finally stands in front of you and asks for peace instead of blood. Ronan placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. It's done, he said softly. She nodded. For now. By afternoon, the hunters were gone, sent down the mountain with their rifles emptied and their memories blurred, carrying only a sense of awe they could never explain. Frost slept inside the cabin, her wound already knitting under Clara's strange new warmth. Outside, Clara stood on the porch, watching sunlight catch the trees. Ronan joined her, now clothed in her grandfather's old coat. "What happens next?" she asked. "The same thing that's always happened," he said. "We guard the veil. You lead us when the song returns." Clara looked down at her hand. The sigil glowed faintly, pulsing with her heartbeat. "I don't even know how to lead myself." Ronan smiled. "You just did." The wind shifted, carrying the cry of an eagle from the valley below. For the first time in years, Clara felt the sound not only in her ears, but in her bones. The mountain's pulse beat with her own. She turned toward him. "You'll teach me?" He nodded once. "Until you don't need teaching." She laughed, a bright, startled sound that echoed off the peaks. "That might take a while." "We have time," he said. "All the time the mountain allows." The wolves emerged from the trees then, Ash among them, her coat unmarked, her eyes bright. She paused beside Clara, brushed against her leg, and looked up with something very close to a smile. Clara knelt, running her fingers through the wolf's fur. "Thank you," she whispered. The pack lifted their heads to the wind, and their howls rolled across the valley, long, layered, neither mournful nor triumphant, but something in between. A song of balance renewed. Ronan took Clara's hand. Together they stood at the edge of the porch as dawn broke fully over Timberline Pass. Below them the forest glimmered, alive and whole again. Above, the sky opened into endless blue. The world had changed, and so had she. "Ready?" Ronan asked. Clara smiled. "Always." They stepped forward into the snow, footprints glowing briefly before fading, leaving the mountain quiet once more, its guardians returned to legend, its song carried on the wind. And just like that, the storm was over. But somewhere high in those frozen peaks, a woman who opened her door to monsters found something far more dangerous: hope. Clara and Ronan's story isn't just about magic or curses. It's about finding light in the coldest places and remembering that love, real love, isn't always human. If you felt something in this story, if you believe that even monsters can be saved, then don't disappear into the night just yet. Subscribe for more dark fantasy love stories, where danger and devotion walk the same path, and every ending is just the beginning of another legend. Until next time, keep your fire burning.